All right, well, Real ID, get ready. Are you guys ready for Real ID? The way that the government will track you, of course, will track you and do everything to make sure that they know where you are at all times of the day. This, of course, is a holdover from the Patriot Act. Well, here is your Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, to give you a warning. She dropped this public service announcement on X. Watch.
Hi, I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. If you plan on traveling, we need your help to prevent delays and to prove your identity. Get a Real ID. Starting May 7th, you will need a Real ID to travel by air or to visit federal buildings in the United States. These IDs keep our country safe because they help prevent fraud and they enhance security. Please do your part to protect our country. Go today and don't delay. To learn more, go to dhs.gov/real-ID. Thank you.
Now, we've been warning about the Real ID for a long time here, and now it's finally coming. A lot of Americans have already gotten it, and they don't see any trouble with it. Harrison Berger is an independent journalist. He's been on this story for a long time and is here to talk about this. Harrison, welcome to the show. Great to see you from Brazil today, from Buenos Aires. Great to see you.
From Rio de Janeiro. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Rio de Janeiro.
I was going to say Buenos Aires is in Argentina.
Argentina. My brain is sorry. I apologize. Welcome from Brazil. And so let's talk about this. Americans are sort of like blindly kind of going along with this, but this is a holdover, of course, from the Patriot Act, is it not? And why should Americans be concerned about Real ID?
It is, and in fact, it's written by the same authors, which makes sense because it's essentially trying to do the same thing, more government surveillance and control over Americans. And let me just remind people what our Fourth Amendment says, because I think we so often forget. It says that there will not be any unlawful or unreasonable searches and seizures, and it protects you against that from the federal government. But since I've been alive pretty much, because I was born in 2001, I'm 23 years old, we've had this erosion of our privacy rights and Fourth Amendment protection, starting with the Patriot Act, now with this Real ID. And so it's not surprising that that's happening right now, because the Trump administration is embracing many of the same tactics as the war on terror. We have this rendition program now where we're sending people to El Salvador. And Kristi Noem from the DHS has announced that she's going to be screening visa applicants for anti-Semitism. And so it makes sense that they're doing this, pulling this tool out of the old war on terror bag and trying to revive this old legislation now at this moment.
Can you explain more about the purpose of Real ID from a government standpoint? Not what they're telling us, but what the actual purpose is, because Representative Thomas Massie said that this is proof that your physical person matches their entry in a database. So can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, basically the data that's printed on these IDs would all be standardized and shared with a single network. That's not what we have right now. Each state controls how they want to ID each of their citizens. That's under the 10th Amendment that we have that. This is a total reversal of that, and it's really a radical change. They want to standardize it and make it national, which makes it easier for the government to track and monitor you. Again, it makes sense why they're doing this, because this is the game that they've been playing for so long.
I mean, is Real ID just really that first step towards, government-controlled digital ID and putting us all on, digital currency, central bank digital currency, all the talks about what we're going to see at the border, of course, biometric scanning coming in, like all of us will be tracked forever. There's no way really to get away from it.
I mean, what's really amazing about this is that I thought it was conservatives who were warning about this. I remember in 2022 when it was Jim Jordan and Thomas Massie who were warning against the DHS, who at the time had the Disinformation Governance Board led by Nina Jankowicz censoring Americans. They were monitoring Americans, monitoring their school board meetings, monitoring their church attendance, all of this. And it was really Mike Johnson and Jim Jordan in Congress who made a big stink about this. But now that Trump is in charge, and they have free reign to go after their political enemies, they've completely abandoned their principles, and now they're wielding the same framework against their own political enemies. It makes you wonder if we're just in this cycle where every 4 years, each political faction, each partisan faction will wield these newly weaponized tools against their enemies, and America is all the worse for it in the end.
Right, because now we see Democrats speaking out against ID laws, you
Yeah.
know, which is something, I mean, they have been for voting for a long time. But so any incumbent party will be for it, and then their challenger will be against it, and then that will just flip flop. And so it's us that needs to stay consistent. And so is this the same kind of tracking ability, though, that the government already has if you have a passport? Because a passport can be a stand-in for a real ID.
I mean, you make a good point. The fact is that the government already has all sorts of tools to monitor you and know everything that you do, everything that you search on the internet, who you talk to. They have all these ways to break encryption. So even your Signal chats and your Telegram chats, they can see who you're talking to. You raise a great question. What else more do they need? But apparently they do need more. They do need to know where we are at all times and basically coerce every American to register with the federal government under this new ID program, which is really novel and revolutionary.
I mean, what happens to individuals who refuse to comply? I mean, there's a lot of people in our audience that are saying, "No, I'm not getting real ID. I'm not going to do it." Do they lose their rights to travel freely within the United States? And would you? I mean, I know I'm asking you kind of a huge question here, but can states step in and say, no, we are sort of a free of real ID state, in Nevada or Arizona, you don't need it here, and therefore come here as like a safe haven?
Well, it has been a states' rights issue for a long time, going back to 2012, 2011. There were groups like the Cato Institute and the ACLU. You had this kind of convergence of left-right interests against this based on what you're saying now, that it's the state's right to decide how they identify each of their residents and citizens. So, what the repercussions could be for people who don't register. I mean, I think we could look to what happened with COVID. I think we can anticipate that people who don't comply with these orders will face some sorts of punishments. What that will be to be determined, but that's what I would anticipate.
Right. And what do you think, what if you refuse, but you want to drive across the border? And then, I mean, we should have the right to do that.
I mean,
Maybe
is that
you
a
don't.
federal crime?
Right.
I mean, all of this is in question now. The fact is that they passed this law a long time ago with the Patriot Act, as you mentioned, but they failed to enforce it for this exact reason, because each state, like New York and Connecticut, they have different rules about this. Connecticut has this real ID. They've had it for a while, but New York has not. And so it creates a lot of confusion. And just like really everything that the DHS has done since 9/11, including the ramping up the security at TSA where we all have to undress, there's no real point to it. It doesn't seem like it makes us safer. There's no evidence that it stopped any terror attacks, because, in fact, we've still had these terror attacks on our soil, like in Boston, that DHS or the FBI or any of these groups failed to stop. It just seems like a way to hassle us. Gore Vidal wrote about this a long time ago. He called it the shredding of the Bill of Rights. And I think that's exactly what's happening now. It was very prescient.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Yeah. So we all have to take off our shoes because some moron, by the way, a British citizen, Richard Reed, decided to put, like some little sticky gum explosives in his shoe that, now we all have to take off our damn shoes. I feel so much safer because of that. This is ridiculous. This is just another way that the Patriot Act continues to rear its ugly head. Harrison, great to see you. Thank you so much for your perspective on this. And it seems like this is going to be the law of the land here really soon, unless we have more Thomas Massey standing up to fight against it. Harrison, great to see you. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Thanks for having me on.